All right, guys, let's get this thing going. Once again, we've got another really, really cool Apple podcast review. So if you guys want to hear your name or your review read, drop them on Apple Podcast. And so the one that I'm excited to share with you today is from J.N. Stange. Uh, so I know who this one is. This one's John Stange. He's written a book. I'm so thankful he reviewed us. He's written a book called Dwell on These Things. It's coming out soon. So jump on Amazon and buy his book, Dwell on These Things. I've had a chance to read it and review it, and it's fantastic. But anyway, to his review. So John says, fantastic show. Dan does such a great job hosting this show, well worth listening to. Dan has a conversational interview style, and his heart for helping fathers lead in their homes is very evident. I love his approach to this important topic. Fantastic show. So thank you, John. I appreciate you being our iTunes or Apple podcast review of the week. So now on to our show. Thanks everybody for listening in. I have got a guest that I'm super excited to talk with today. Him and I both share a number of different things from our background, and then also so many things that are so different. This is going to be a conversation I'm really, really excited to have. So we'll start with some similarities. Our guest was in the Army, and he was also an Army Ranger, and I also was in the Army, and I watched the Army Rangers climb onto the plane that we helped load, and then they would take off and go somewhere. So he actually jumped out of the planes. I watched him board and jump out of the. I didn't do any of the jumping, but our guest today did. His name is Marek Rudak. And we rehearsed that before the show, on and on and on. Feel free and correct me, Marek, but welcome to the show.
Well, thank you so much, Dan. I really appreciate it. And what a wonderful Apple podcast review. I hope I don't destroy your trend. This will not be the last positive review you've gotten, but thank you so much for having me. And thank you for being part of the team that ensured that those airborne operations are safe, because it's very risky. People get hurt, people have gotten hurt, people have died. And so in this type of operation, no role is too small. Everybody's role makes a big difference. So thank you so much for being there. I'm not sure if we like overlap time-wise, but it does, irregardless, your job made a difference. And the people who made those jumps safely are definitely very appreciative of your work.
Yeah, I think our time in Fort Bragg was like right on the edge of each other. So we may have overlapped for a second. We may not have. But that was really cool being able to serve at the same place and knowing where you were for quite some time. So that's really cool. In addition to being an Army Ranger and with the 82nd and those type things, you're also a leadership coach. You've also come from a place of no faith, meaning like geography wise, Poland, communist Poland. Mm-hmm. And so you've got all kinds of just fantastic things for us to talk about today.
Sure.
All over the map. But let's start with some military stuff.
Cool.
I love swapping military stories with guys. So going back to when you were in, what's something that maybe a funny story or something that you like just remember and it's stayed with you over the years?
Wow, there's so many. It's like for whatever reason there's the story comes from me from actually Ranger School. It was actually, what happens on the first day, you have a lot of different tests, like PT tests, swim tests, and literally like tens of people drop off. And so like, for example, I did this one, so it was the swim test. So long story short, it's the combat water survival test. And what you have to do, part of it is I forget the exact distance, but I want to say about 10 yards swim with full gear. And,
I'm like 10 yards. Cool. I'm with you.
Well, it's funny
full
because
gear. Hold on a second.
Yeah. So 10 yards doesn't seem like much. And even the gear is not so bad, but what's really hard is having
Did you have boots on?
That's what it is. Because like essentially like these boots with water, they're like 50-pound weights just like attached to your feet. And so long story short is when I first showed up to the infantry officer basic course, I actually failed that it's a swim test, and it's like I almost drowned, and then the problem is because I was brute forcing it. A lot of times you kind of like self-taught and it's good enough for government job, but when you got those boots on, it's a different story. So once I learned the stroke that you're supposed to glide, not use just use all muscle, that helped me. But but so I did very well on that portion, but there's like another portion where you actually have to jump off the platform, and it's not too tall. It's like I want to say like 3 meters. And basically the whole idea is you equipment, you're blindfolded, and what they're looking for is that you don't panic, and you just carry on. And so with that one, ironically, the part that I was really training for, and feared a little bit, was no problem. That 10-yard swim, no worries. And I got to the tower. I thought, oh, this is easy peasy. I jump in, and I've done this thing like at least 10 times before, no issues whatsoever. But this one time I jump in, and when I jump in, it's like the air got knocked out of me. I was like, ugh, and it's like, I don't know if you ever experienced that, where
I
you can't
have.
breathe. And I'm like, what do I do? I can't breathe. But the thing is, like, if you show panic, they kick you out, And so I'm like, oh, please, Lord. Like, back then I wasn't much of I wasn't a believer, but in those moments, your faith comes back to you. And I was like, don't panic, just wait. And then, like, out of nowhere, I was able to breathe, and nobody saw anything. But it's just, I believe that's really the reason why I like that story is because that's really, I don't know about you, but that's what I get out of military. It teaches you to persevere for extra few seconds, these extra amounts of time that don't seem significant of their own. But in that case, that couple of extra seconds was the difference between me graduating and not graduating. And so that's why I like that story. And that's kind of the biggest thing I got from the military is learning to persevere for an extra second, extra minute, maybe extra day,
Ooh, that's
because
good
you
right
don't know the
there.
day or the hour when the Holy Spirit kicks in or things change. And that may be the difference between winning and losing.
I was in high school when you're talking about getting the wind knocked out of you. I was on the wrestling team, and this guy hip tossed me, and I landed square on my back, just
Mm,
flush,
mm,
all the air just, and the guy jumps on top of me to pin me. Why, he had zero fight. Like, I was
mm.
just, and my buddy, his nickname was Fat. So Fat, if you're listening, I'm not calling you Fat. I'm just using your nickname. In fact, the guy climbs up, he goes, pin done. And the guy gets off me, and Fat looks at, he goes, you all right? I'm not saying anything because I can't. I have no idea. He
Yeah,
goes,
yeah.
hey, you all right? I don't move, nothing. He goes, can you breathe? What's wrong with you?
Yeah.
I'm like, and you're like, dear Lord. And that I'm like, oh God, I might die. I cannot breathe.
Yeah. Yeah.
Please help me. And Fat is just looking at me like he doesn't know. He's confused. I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, literally, I feel like I might die. Like there's a major problem happening and I cannot express it to you. Somebody help me.
Yeah, it's freaky. I mean, I guess that's why waterboarding is so effective as a torture technique. Because like when I think about the times that what I was the most scared is like when you're fighting for air, something you take so for granted. It just freaks me out. So I've never been waterboarded, but I can see how that's an effective torture technique.
There was another time, now that you bring up water, I was going over some waterfalls. There's this place called Johnson Shut-ins. It was at flood stage.
Mm-hmm.
It's south of St. Louis, and just amazing, beautiful nature place. Love to connect with God there.
Mm-hmm.
And I didn't know it was at flood stage when we went. And my cousin got sucked down this river, and I kind of followed her.
Mm-hmm.
And I realized she was in trouble. So I tried to keep up with her and
Mm-hmm.
went over waterfall after waterfall after waterfall. And I thought, and I, was taking water in and it was getting bad. And I said, God, I think I can do one more of these.
Mm-hmm.
If there's one more, I'll be okay
Mm-hmm.
and I'll figure it out. And then one more happened. I got shot way down. My shorts slipped off me.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, I've got two choices. I can drown and have shorts on,
Mm-hmm.
or I can let these shorts go
Yeah.
and I'll live,
Mm-hmm.
because I'm sure that was the last waterfall. And I'm
Mm-hmm.
like, you know what? I want these shorts.
Mm-hmm.
So I cinched them up, somehow made it to the top, and I was done.
Mm-hmm.
I'm like, thank you, God, for saving me. And
Yeah.
there's this another waterfall. And I said, oh, this is it. I'm finished. I just died. I come over this waterfall and I look to my left and I'm thinking to myself, God, I love you, man. I can't believe this is it, but this is it. Just peaceful. Just
Right.
sunshine's coming in.
Mm-hmm.
And I look over and I see this green arm floating in the water. I'm like, oh my goodness, what is that? But whatever it is, I think it's the hand of God and I should grab a hold.
Mm-hmm.
So I snatch this arm and grab this hand, and the water pulls me and I lose my grip. I thought, God, if that was you saving me, what just happened? And all of a sudden, that arm instead reaches back and snatches me and pulls me out of the water. And
Wow.
I'm like, so excited to see literally the face of God.
Hmm.
And instead, it's this guy. And he goes, "Was that fun?" I said, "You don't understand, mister." He says, "Well, it looked like you had fun. Can I send my kids down?" And
Oh, he didn't realize he saved your life.
yes, I'm like, man, I thought I literally was going to die. And like,
Mm,
never mind. You don't understand where I'm coming from. I'm spitting water out. I'm trying
mhm.
to, Heimlich maneuver myself and get all the water. But it was so funny. But that was another time where the oxygen was just gone. And I'm praying to God. So it's funny when you're within an, a second of dying, that's where immediately where those thoughts go, no matter where you are in life, I think. So,
Yeah. Amen.
oh my
Amen.
goodness. So yeah, that in the military, when I was in also that same
Hmm.
mindset, like just a little bit further, just keep
Hmm.
going. Like somebody else is doing it, so I'm not going to quit. I'm just going to keep going. Like that's been a theme in my life over and over and over again. Just keep going, keep going, keep going. Don't give up.
Yeah.
Don't quit.
Yeah. Yeah. And
So
another thing that comes to my mind, I'm a very visual person. Have you ever seen that movie, Any Given Sunday,
yeah,
with Al Pacino? One of my favorite TV, I guess, movie speeches. He talks about the game of inches. What a powerful analogy. Inch, inch, and those inches don't seem like much by themselves, but when you add them up, it's the difference between winning and losing. And it's just a very powerful speech, and very powerful images, and very true.
yeah. Life's hard by the yard, but a cinch by the inch.
Hmm.
So you do enough of those little steps and you look backwards over time and you're like, wow, I've made some distance. I've done
Amen.
some things. So
Amen.
yeah, really cool, really cool. You ever have a time where you were outside of the time where you almost drowned,
Hmm.
where or the time where you went off the the step and
Hmm.
lost your oxygen, where you felt like you really needed something extra? I imagine going through through ranger school or something. There was a time
Yeah.
where you felt
Yes.
like you were at the edge.
Yeah. So, interestingly enough, I've been tested and pushed and learned a lot in the army, Iraq and Afghanistan. But actually, the by far the most painful event of my life, and nothing came close to it since, has been my divorce. My divorce. The reason being is that the reason my divorce came about is my ex-wife cheated on me with her boss, and that's something that I just I mean, when I found out, to this day, I'll never forget that day. It's just it's like a bomb went off. I just kept saying Jesus. And then, but back then, I wasn't really, somebody who was of faith. I mean, I had the education, but to me, it was something, nice people do. But it was such a dagger to the heart that all I could say was just Jesus Christ, Jesus Christ. And I don't even know how long I did it for. It's like the time stopped. It just, like, the world as I knew it just got turned upside down, and just like it made me feel like I don't even know what's going on, because like with my wife, we with my ex-wife, we didn't have a great marriage, but I thought I could trust her. And
Mhm.
I think you could really relate to it from the military perspective, is that we trust is very important to us. To us, it's a difference between living and dying. And obviously, whatever you serve in, people have different religions, sexual orientations, things like that. But that in the day, when the bullets start flying, they got your back. And that's how I thought of my marriage, is that I knew it wasn't a great marriage, but I thought that my wife has my back when it comes to important things. And at the time, both of my parents were deceased. And so when that happened, it just, like, everything I knew up to that date just got thrown out the window. And it was super painful. There were days where I didn't sleep. Like weeks, or literally when I couldn't sleep, I was super stressed. And it was very painful. But yet, looking back, it was actually the best thing that ever happened to me, because that's exactly what I needed to start my walk back to Christ, because I realized that everything I did up that time, which was, in my mind, mind blowing, things like going to West Point, graduating from Ranger School, as wonderful as it was on its own, meant nothing without God. And so that's when that foundation of me building things on my own crumbled. And as painful as it was a perfect start point of building a real foundation with God at the center.
Wow. So let's talk about the divorce for a second, but
Mm-hmm.
let's step into that building things on your own, because there's something there. I think a lot of
Mm-hmm.
guys relate to that, of the achievement that they're going for or that they've had.
Sure.
Like, what's that story for you?
Yeah. So to me, it started really, kind of like I'm a amateur philosopher. I like to really get to the root of things. So, that really started with my childhood. I had a very abusive grandfather. Long story short, what happened is my parents were married, but my dad never lived with us. So it was basically like I was a child of divorce. And so my father figure was my abusive grandfather. Man, he was just um, so aggressive, so like he knew exactly the words to say to make you feel like total crap, and it just even to this day, like when I think some of the things he said, I can recall that tightness in my chest. He just made me feel like I was useless, like I was crap, and he did that to the whole family. And so I grew up with this inner wound of feeling like I wasn't good enough, I wasn't smart enough, I wasn't confident enough, you name it, wasn't enough. But I did pretty well in school, and so to me, I thought that the way to compensate for that destroyed confidence in my childhood was by accomplishments. So, first I started getting grades, that got me into West Point. Then at West Point, I realized, oh man, I'm actually like pretty fit guy. So I did very, very physically. And so I thought that as you kind of put these tabs on your uniform, these badges on your uniform, that will compensate for that wound that was given to me as a child. But the thing about it was, I didn't realize it as such. To me, I thought this is what men do. And so it's perfectly good thing to do, but in my mind, I did it for the wrong reasons. In other words, I did it because I want to grow and develop. But really, if you kind of peel back the onion, I did it because my confidence was destroyed, and I thought that if I put these tabs and badges, then that will give me the confidence. But the thing about it is like it's never enough. It's never enough. And so to me, it was like, first it was the badges, it was enough. Then it was corporate America and the paycheck, it was enough. Then I thought it was going to be marriage, and then the marriage blew up and the whole house of cards blew up. And that made me realize how all of these things, when you don't address the root cause, you don't have the proper foundation. It doesn't matter how nice of a house you build, without proper foundations, it's only a matter of time till it crumbles.
Yeah, for sure. That achievement, and Chad Williams was on the podcast a while back. He was a Navy SEAL, and he said one of the worst days of his life was the day after he graduated from Navy SEAL training from Buds. He's like, I did it, and I reached the summit, and that was what I wanted to get to, and then I realized that it was nothing. It wasn't anything there.
Yeah, and it's don't get me wrong. If I had to do my life all over again, I would have done a lot of things differently. I still would have went to West Point. I still would have joined the military. But to be 100% honest with you, the main reason why I joined the military is because I saw these people on TV or on the movies in uniform with military
Yeah,
experience, with confidence. Like, man, I want to be just like that. And I
I'm
thought
with
that,
you. When I was
yeah,
at Fort
yeah,
Bragg and we saw the cool Ranger tab,
yeah.
man, those Rangers walking around, there's everybody else. And then there was the Rangers. Well, there's Delta Force too. But I was like, those Rangers, those guys look like they got it.
Yeah, but that's the thing. There's always the next level. So there's special forces, but wait, above special forces, Delta Force. But wait, above Delta Force, there's even a uniform units that are not even identified. So it's like you can keep going, and if you have that mindset of reaching the pinnacle, there's never such thing as a pinnacle.
So going on that higher level and that pinnacle, I know physical fitness has been important to you.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk about some of the things that you've done there, some things that you think that physical fitness has helped you or men in life with?
Sure. So there's obviously a lot of clear benefits to fitness. So what I'll try to do is I'll try not to talk about the obvious, like, cholesterol,
Yeah. All
weight.
that stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, like one of the things that I really enjoy about fitness, it helped me feel like a kid again, And so, like, one of the main things I got that feeling from was CrossFit. And when I grew up, kind of going to my abusive grandfather, I was a fat kid. He made fun of me for, like, being fat and not being fit and being the slowest kid in class. And so now all of a sudden, I get to do things that I could never do as a kid. So, for example, things like handstand push-ups, double unders, overhead squats. And so, like, doing these things, aside from the physical fitness benefits, it's very relaxing. It makes you feel like a kid again. And it helps you realize, like how much our mind is an obstacle, because there's like a lot of exercises that when I started CrossFit, I'm like, oh, no way, I'll never be able to do it. And then, it didn't happen overnight, but like in a year or two, I was able to do it, no problem. And so to me, it's like a perfect case study to prove to your mind just how much it lies to you to keep you safe. And yes, you stay safe, but like, there's a saying that, yes, ships are safe in harbor, but that's not what the ships are built for.
Right. Right. Yes, exactly. Exactly. Yeah. Fitness has really helped me as well. Just it helps keep me mentally sharp.
Hmm.
And when
Hmm.
things do get difficult, I think back of oftentimes about the difficult physical things I've done.
Hmm.
Oh, if I can do that, then I can get past this mental challenge that I'm having. As we talked about earlier, I can keep going.
Yeah, yeah,
This
yeah.
isn't the end. I've got more in me. I just have to work through it. And, whether it's mental, physical, or, asking God for help or, all these different things. But yeah,
Mhm.
physicals help me out so many different ways. And then you can do like CrossFit. I'm sure you love your buddies at the gym, wherever it is that you do CrossFit
Yeah,
at.
yeah.
Like,
So I don't actually do CrossFit anymore because I'm at an age where it's probably diminishing returns, but I definitely appreciate that time. And so nowadays, especially with COVID, I was able to build my home gym and use some of those skill sets from CrossFit. But it doesn't necessarily be CrossFit. It's just whatever connects with you. It could be running, could be weightlifting, but I really encourage you, at all possible, do it in group setting as much as possible, because that's how you make friends. That's how you learn. That's how you push each other, in a friendly way. And obviously, I understand right now with COVID, it's a bit of a challenge, but it should be much longer. And so I encourage you, who's ever listening, if fitness is a challenge, try to do it in a group setting. That doesn't have to be CrossFit, it could be Orange Theory. There's a lot of wonderful things, and I know these places are going to be more than happy to welcome you in after COVID. So you not only get physical fitness, but also that sense of community, which in turn will help you be not only more fit, but also more connected in your community.
yeah. So you show up to a community, wherever it is,
Uh-huh.
where you know somebody or you don't know somebody. If you're willing to get better, they're not going to make fun of you. I mean,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah, and a lot of these people are in the same boat. So
Yeah.
like that's kind of like what I like in CrossFit. Like I was good at some things that other people weren't, but other people were good at things that I wasn't. Because it's
Yeah.
such a wide, like CrossFit is a sports of fitness, and it doesn't necessarily be CrossFit. I mean, there could be other like fitness regimens, but whenever you go to a community, there's never going to be anybody who's like perfect at everything, and
Yeah.
so you can learn it from each other, you can encourage each other. And some of the best conversation I've had was in between doing deadlifts and in between doing bench presses. And to me, that was kind of like how I warmed up into opening up, because I think that it's safe to say that we as men, we're not very good about opening up. And I certainly wasn't. Nowadays I have no problem with it, but it wasn't something I was born with. It then wasn't something that I really started practicing in my mid-30s. And one of the best ways to practice it was actually by doing something that was comfortable, which was physical fitness, and having those conversations between the lifts that helped me and prep me for having those deeper conversations down the road. And that's what I consider now to be a superpower, not only my coaching, but also developing relationships. I mean, like we connected at a conference, and
Yeah.
my guess is that part of the reason why you reached out to me is because I'm willing to talk about my dirty laundry, not because I want to talk about it, but in a way to encourage other people and make them realize that, hey, you're not the only one. Everybody's struggling. I've struggled too. This is how I've done it, and you can do it too.
Yeah, absolutely. So I imagine I grew up in that way, and most guys did, where we aim for perfection. We
Hmm.
don't admit when we're wrong. We, hold it all in to the outside world. We're perfect. I can imagine growing up in communist Poland, that was absolutely the way to go. And
Yeah, and it's, in communist Poland, it's that is true. But also another thing about communist Poland is, in communism, you kind of you also told to not to stand out, and so, for example, like one way you kind of get conditioned into it is that, like me, I was never hungry, I was never naked, but we basically had like same types of pants, same types of shoes, so everybody basically kind of looked the
yeah,
same.
right.
And so that still applies, but also I think in the communism, the kind of the unique aspect of it is that the system is made to have you conform, so that way, like when you try to step out, that takes extra courage, so it's kind of like a balancing act where obviously you want to perform, as a man you want to be perfect, but I think in a communist setting, it's that perfection is your ability to fit into this predefined mold that is expected of you as a citizen of that particular communist regime.
I just talked to a good friend of mine. He's a pretty amazing guy, great marriage, great kids. And he's got a kid that's pretty exceptional at a few different things. And he's
Hmm.
lacking in a particular area. And for some reason, my buddy had to go talk to the principal of the kid's school.
Hmm.
And he says, he was talking about some sporting event or something like that. And the principal's like, oh, no, you wouldn't want to do that. You'd want to make for sure that they kind of fit in and blend. And he's like, let me ask you a question, Mr. Principal. Are you saying that everybody gets a trophy?
Mm.
Yeah, absolutely. Everybody gets a trophy. He's like, well, what if my kid is like exceptional at school or, what
Hmm.
have you? Well, no, I want them to kind of blend in and we treat everybody the same. And no, we don't look at personality types or any of that. We
Mm.
treat everybody the same and we keep them all in, a B type rank. And he's like, are you kidding me? And
Hmm.
his wife, they leave and his wife's like, we got to get our kid out of this school.
Yeah, 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 yeah. No, no, no,
So they're
no, that
exploring options right now. Some of them
that's
are pretty
good.
pricey, but they're willing to spend kind of higher dollar stuff or move or whatever the case is. But yeah, it's funny how people um, don't recognize that blending in and keeping everybody the same. It's like, no, whatever your talents are, let's grow them and use our gifts and do the best we can. So
Yeah, yeah, and it's. I think some people think it's binary. It's one or the other. I think there's times where we want to blend in. There are times where to be civil and have kind of common rituals. But at the same time, you also want to have opportunity for people to flourish. And I think a lot of times people think it's binary, but I think that there's an opportunity to find that middle ground for different areas of your life.
I remember when I got in the military, my dad's advice to me from him being in the military was don't stand out.
Mm,
Whatever you do, figure out a way to be around everybody and never get
yeah.
outside of the pack. You don't want
Yeah.
those guys to know who you are. And so, very first day, they're like, all right, who's a college graduate? I step forward, like, uh-oh.
Mm. Just a
Nobody
bit of a
else stepped
problem.
forward. Like, you're the leader. I'm like,
Hmm.
dear God, please help me. I don't know what just happened, but dad's one rule was blend in.
Right.
And
Right.
it's day one within 5 minutes, and I'm already standing out. So that actually worked out really, really well. I'm glad it glad it happened
Awesome.
the way that it did.
Yeah, that's how we grow. It's to step into that, blending in. It's got a price. It's more comfortable, but it comes at the sacrifice of growth. That's it's growth is not comfortable, but that's how you get better.
Yeah. Have you got a time that you can think of, just any random thing where you were uncomfortable but decided to make a move?
Oh, well, a lot of them. I think that probably the biggest one, and it actually kind of ties into my biggest fear is quitting my job. Quitting my job because between West Point and my active duty time, I was 10 years in the Army. And then because I was in the Army, I thought that my superpower, if you will, was bigger organizations. And so that's part of the reason why I ended up at ExxonMobil, which is, was, and I guess it still is a big corporation, even though they're going through a downturn. And I thought that was my superpower, was working with these big power structures, leveraging, synergizing, you kind of insert your favorite corporate buzzword. And so when it came, and I remember all along this time, I always kind of look at these people who have their own business, and it didn't matter if it was some, big entrepreneur like Elon Musk or just kind of like a mom and pop flower shop. And I always thought to myself, man, these guys, that's amazing. Have your own business. But I wish I could do that. I wish I could do that. But that's not me. That's not me. You know, I'm a big organization guy. And so that's kind of like the story I was telling myself. And, you know, even when I decided that I need um, to start my own business, it wasn't an overnight process because I got my coaching certification and I knew this was my calling in life. But it's scary. It's really scary to step out on your own and give up that big corporate paycheck. And it took me, oh my goodness, probably took me about 2 years to actually do it. And I was really to be honest with you, I was really trying to find excuses not to do it. And in fact, when I met my wife, I met her at a Catholic retreat for young adults, and obviously I sensed some attraction, and I was trying to kind of like use it that maybe I could stay at ExxonMobil. I was like, well, you know, it's like let me tell her what I want to do, and I'm pretty sure she's gonna tell me I'm crazy because you know she's an attorney in her mid-30s. You know, she's probably looking for a real man, somebody who can provide, who has a stable paycheck, not some
Right.
wannabe entrepreneur in his late 30s. So I thought when I tell her that, she's gonna tell me to like, oh, are you crazy? But she was super supportive, and so after that I was like, man, I have no more excuses, it's time to jump in. And it's been hard, it's been challenging, but it's led to a lot of growth. And whatever happens, I know that on my deathbed I will not say what if. I know that whatever I wanted to do, I pursued it, right, wrong, or different.
That's fantastic. And that's so cool to have a wife like you have
Mhm.
that absolutely blessed you and said, "No, go for it." Like that's okay. Let's do this.
Yeah, and you know, at first I thought it might be how can I say, it might be a disadvantage because I have to think about like the family. It might be something that would slow down my thinking process, but it actually it's the opposite. I think that had I not married her and had I went into business by myself, I'm 99% sure I probably would have been back in corporate America.
Right,
and, s-
right.
and
Yes.
and so and so the funny thing is, and I'll be honest with you, even though I'm an Army Ranger, I did all of these different things. Uh, if it wasn't for my wife's encouragement, I probably would have been back at a desk job with the with the tail between my legs.
Yeah, yeah. I had a similar experience and I was leaving one corporate gig and
Mhm,
looking to move into entrepreneurship. And I was back then I did a whole lot more studying and researching before I made a move. And I was just a miserable person. I was so stressed out. I knew I had to jump,
mhm.
but I wasn't quite ready to do it yet. And one day my wife says to me, "You are so miserable.
Right.
I'm really tired of living with you." It wasn't
Mhm,
like she's saying we're going for a divorce or anything, but she
mhm.
just says, "You need to jump. You need to make a change." Her
Yeah.
words were, "You need to just quit and go figure something out. I don't
Mhm.
care what it is."
Yeah.
And I let her rest on that for a second. And then she says something she doesn't remember saying. And she cannot believe she said it to this day, but she said, "Hey, listen, if flipping burgers will
Mhm.
make you happy, go do that.
Yeah.
I don't care how much money you make."
Mhm.
And I kind of looked over my shoulders. I'm like, am I actually hearing this? The burden that I placed on my own self of
Mhm.
having to bring home the paycheck
Yeah.
is now no longer there.
Amen.
I now have the confidence of my wife or permission from my wife that I can go do something and try something. And it didn't take long after that before I was like, all right, done. I'm
Amen.
I'm I'm going. And thankfully enough, I met my business partner
Mhm.
the day before I was making a huge move. I
Mhm.
met him at church and he had a thing going on where he was never around at church. It was a physical injury. So he's in the hospital instead of
Mhm.
where I thought he was supposed to be, where all my friends were trying to connect us. And, us being guys, like we don't use the telephone. So I
Mhm.
kept waiting for him to physically be where
Yeah.
he was. And everybody kept telling me he's hurt and whatever. And the day before I was going to make a move, he's sitting next to me at Donut Sunday
Mhm.
at the table next to me. And thankfully we connected and it's been a brilliant story ever since. But like truly a God moment. Like
Yeah.
God kept leading me in my life different ways and hit. And I know you've had tons of those different things. You mentioned the divorce earlier and how that just like broke you as a man,
Yeah. Yeah.
and God used that experience to bring you through. Are there any other learning moments from that you like to share?
Yeah, sure. So that was kind of like the trigger moment. But I definitely wasn't one of those people who had like a overnight conversion. I guess in my case, reversion, because I was brought up Catholic. I had all the sacraments, so I had the certs, if you will, and I had the institutional knowledge. But my heart wasn't in it for sure. It never was up until that point. I mean, I wasn't disrespectful. I was really, in a way. I remember like even when I was at West Point, there's a lot of there was a lot of Christians there, and especially like the Protestant folks, like they would just go through the cadet area with like Bibles in their hands, and I was like thinking, it's like, man, I wish I could believe like they do. It's like that's kind of cool, like that they actually like believe, and because in my mind, like I knew the information, but to me, I felt like this is something that I might look into my retirement. This is what nice people do, but to graduate, to do all these things, I need to use all of my time working on myself so I can do that. I don't have the luxury to put that in somebody else's hand. That was my approach. And so so the divorce was the spark, but it took me a good number of years to actually walk the talk, and so it started with prayer. Definitely prayer was a big thing. And I think that another pivotal moment for me was actually putting something of importance in God's hands. So obviously I mentioned like starting a business, but even before that, one of the things that was a big test for me was I did a lot of online dating. I did a lot of
Hmm.
online dating because I kind of had this typical guy engineering approach, is like, hey, it didn't work out. So the best thing to do is to throw as many things on the wall as possible and see what sticks,
Right, right, yeah.
because it's not me. It's not me. It's just, it's just basically a matter of getting matched up with somebody else. And so, I had a lot of experiences with online dating, and what I've noticed is that, especially I was growing my faith, I realized that I was not practicing, what the church teaches. And even if you're not non-Catholic, there's obviously I think it's pretty safe to say that as a Christian we believe in not having sex before marriage. Obviously, the Catholic community has a stricter standard about theology of the body, but I think at the fundamental level, an average Christian will agree that sex before marriage is not having sex before marriage is optimal. And so what I found is that when I was doing these online dating dates or whatnot, I had that intention, but then things happened, and then later on, even when I was dating Christian like ladies or even Catholic ladies, well, because we go to church, it's okay, right?
Yeah.
That was the rationalization that we used. But but it's just I just kept having these bad experiences. Obviously, the sex was great, but it was just a matter of time till the relationship broke apart. And I remember just having this kind of intuitive feeling that I need to start trusting Lord. There's this one thing I remember, like I was in a daily mass once, and I don't know who said it. I was trying to research it, and I still wasn't able to find the person who said it, but it was super powerful. And it basically said, you cannot really say that you believe in God until you trust Him. You know, and I was like, yeah, I mean, it's like one thing to to talk the talk, but another is walk the walk. And so that inspired me to delete all of my dating profiles. And to me, that was like at the time, because at the time I wasn't thinking about entrepreneurship. I was doing very well at Exxon, so I thought I was going to be at Exxon for the rest of my career. Getting these 10% raises every single year. That's what I thought. And so to me, at that time, the most precious thing to me was getting remarried, my marriage. And for a while I did it my way through
Yeah.
the engineering pro, not just being on one dating website. As an engineer, I was like on 5 different dating websites to maximize the throughput. And I thought to myself, man, I need to start walking the talk. I need to trust God. And so I deleted all of my dating online profiles. And it's hard. I don't know, have you ever done online dating then? Or
No,
was
no,
that, yeah,
I never have. I thankfully met my wife before
mm,
that became a big thing.
yeah,
However, so many of my guy and
yeah,
women
yeah,
friends have told me their experiences, and I'm thinking to
yeah,
myself, "Oh my goodness, like this is."
yeah.
And then at the same time, once you reach a certain age, you think that's the only way to meet somebody.
Yeah, and and I don't want to be like a broad brush criticism, because I know some people met their ideal partners online. So I'm not saying it doesn't happen, but more often than not, and especially in my case, it just led to temptation,
Yeah. Yeah.
because
And
it's
that's
a
what I hear
very,
from people all the time
yeah,
is that it's, match.com or whatever. It's more
yeah,
hookup.com as opposed to
yeah.
truly a match.
But then you tell yourself, well, I'm on Christian Mingle, so
Yeah.
obviously this is Christian, and it just happens, and it just reinforces the idea that, hey, this is, this is what happens, in real life. And so I deleted, and it's hard because like these apps, they send, I mean, they're designed to get you addicted. They send you these wings, these pop-up messages, and obviously all these women, they always put their best pictures on the
Mm-hmm.
site, so it really feeds your ego. And so like when I first quit it, it was hard. It was like, quitting a drug. But that time really helped me to work on myself, instead of just using the high of a new relationship to brush over the pain that needs to be inside. That actually helped me to address that pain. And so that helped me to quit pornography. It helped me to quit masturbation. And I believe that those things, all of those things combined, prepared me to be able to love fully. And when I met Jesse, to give my full love and be able to discern whether the marriage was the best course of action, not just me, but for both of us. And so it was hard, and didn't happen overnight, but it laid that foundation of love, loving each other for who we are, rather than what we can do for each other, rather than having endorphins, drive us into something that might be great at the moment, but in long term, covers the fact that we're not compatible at very important levels.
So that was a conscious decision to get rid of all your profiles
Hmm.
and hey, God, I trust you.
Amen. And it was hard, and again, it's not something that I just happens overnight. I was wrestling with the decision. And so the reason why I'm saying that is because, sometimes people feel, at least it was me, like you see some of these people that are well known in the Christian world, and they had that one moment conversion,
Yeah.
or they never like really struggle with anything, and praise the Lord, that's great. But I remember watching these people, and made me think like, well, these guys are basically chosen by God to be these engineered special species that doesn't don't struggle with
Right.
people that, or these guys have not made the same type of mistakes that I've done, and because I've done them, that maybe that's why I can do the things that they talk about. And so that's why what I'm hoping, I'm not saying this to brag or just kind of air my dirty laundry. What I'm hoping to do is that the people who listen, who feel like, hey, I got you, Marek, but I watched porn for 25 years. There's no way I can quit it. Well, guess what? That's how I was too. And it wasn't easy, but please know that it is possible.
Yeah, absolutely. And I'm more like you, where it takes me a little bit of time
Mhm.
to work through some things. And that conversion moment wasn't snap your fingers. It was a gradual and many different things. It's just taken a while, but staying persistent, like we talked about, and just keep moving in a direction, keep trusting God.
Mhm.
Funny story I heard the other day. There was this oh a high wire act type guy, and he
Mhm.
decided he was going to high wire across the Niagara Falls
Oh
way
wow.
back in the day, and so he
Mhm.
did it. And then he became more daring and kept doing different things. And one day he got this wheelbarrow and he went across the Niagara Falls. And it was like, oh my gosh, that's amazing! I can't believe he did that
Mhm.
on the high wire on the tightrope. And he gets to where the whole crowd is, and he says, "Who thinks I can now put somebody into the wheelbarrow and make it across all the way?" Everybody
Mhm.
goes nuts. Like, this is going to be unbelievable. We're going to
Yeah.
get to see this. This is fantastic. And he says, all right, so you all think I can do it?
Mhm.
Absolutely. Do you believe I can do it?
Mhm.
Absolutely. Perfect. Who wants to get in the wheelbarrow?
Cricket, cricket.
Crickets. Yes. Nobody said they want to get. So that's where trust comes in. Like, so when
Yeah,
you
yeah,
fully
yeah.
trust in God,
Mhm.
are you willing to get in the wheelbarrow?
Yeah, and,
And
and it's scary, but that's where the growth comes from. But let's look at the Bible. Look at all the major biblical characters. I mean, look at Peter. He was the God's, I mean, Jesus's chosen disciple. He was the kind of the leader, if you will, and he saw the miracles. I mean, like, can you imagine having a more front seat experience to being with Jesus than Peter? And what happened? Even he denied him 3 times.
yes.
And same, I guess, well, I guess same thing happened with Judas. But what was the difference is that when that betrayal happened, one came back and the other one didn't. And so that's to me, it's also, and I guess I'm kind of speaking from my experience. It's very easy for us to assume that, hey, we don't have what it takes, we don't have the genetics or the special favor, if you will. But if you look at the biblical characters, I cannot think of anyone who was just perfect from the get-go. All of them, even if they had the favor, fell short at some point, but because they picked themselves up, that's what made them the people that we read about and people that inspire us to keep growing, to keep moving, to keep reaching God. And in fact, because of their mistakes, that's what makes them relatable. And because of their mistakes, we can find them ourselves in those stories and get encouragement in the times when it feels like things are not going to change.
Yeah, I recently heard a little shift. Jesus is praying before he gets crucified. God, deliver me from this.
Mm,
Dad, in his case, deliver me from this, and if it's your will, and
mhm,
let's move forward. But the thought was, one of Jesus's thoughts could be, hey, I'm about to be betrayed by my friends, and not
mm,
only that, I'm about to be betrayed by my best friend.
right.
And I'm like, oh wow, like that's a whole
Mm,
nother, like, when we're betrayed by somebody, like you were betrayed by your ex-wife,
yeah.
like that, like you said, your whole world was shattered, all your beliefs, like,
Yeah.
and I'm like, wow, Jesus had that too. Like
Yeah.
I'm like, I get Peter's side, like that's horrible and shameful,
Mm,
and like
mhm,
this is terrible, and I can't believe I did this with,
ah,
like you mentioned, seeing everything firsthand.
mhm,
But then if I put myself in Jesus' shoes and go, wow, my best friend's about ready to say he doesn't know me
yeah.
3 times.
It kind of puts that whole sweating blood in perspective.
Yes, yes, just an amazing time there. Any other things that you think of from to share with the guys, whether it be
Mhm,
from your divorce, whether it be with your new wife,
mhm,
maybe some breakthroughs that you've had there? It's funny, before you're married and after you're
sure.
married, how that
Sure.
relationship changes.
Yeah, yeah. So it's kind of the unique situation that I'm in is that I did it my way in my first marriage, and I saw the consequences, and I'm doing everything God's way in my current marriage, and I see it's like, for me it's not theory. Like some people, some people who are on the circuit, they've been married since they were 18. Well, you have like, you had Chris Stefanik, who's like a grandfather at 40 years old, so like with me, like what I talk about, I've experienced both ways, so to me it's not theory, it's practical. And so obviously there's a lot of things I could talk about, but like one thing that I've been very helpful in my marriage, and actually something that comes out in some of my coaching sessions when it comes to relationships, it's it's how to manage conflict, because conflict is inevitable. It's and what happens after the conflict. And so, for example, like in my first marriage, whenever conflict happened, it created a wedge that just kind of grew wider and wider and bigger, and over time it destroyed the relationship, whereas what I found now is that in my marriage, obviously we have conflict, we're not perfect, but the way we deal with that conflict makes all the difference. And actually, that when you deal with the conflict productively, it brings the couple closer together, because I used to think that conflict is a sign of more trouble to come, and it's like, oh my goodness, that's what they talk about on TV, that marriage never works, it's just misery, and you just it's an endless compromise, and you just pray to God that that you can minimize that conflict, and it doesn't lead to divorce, because it's never a good thing. But one thing that I found in my marriage is that conflict can actually lead to a deeper relationship. And I'll give you an example. My wife is a huge animal lover. She's got 3 dogs and a cat. I grew up in communist Poland, where it's not like we're abusive to animals, but animals had a place and a purpose. So for example, my uncle had a dog because he was a hunter.
Yeah.
My grandma had a dog because the dog was patrolling the perimeters. You did not take that dog to take pictures with Santa and dress up in costumes. And so to me it was a big adjustment when I first met her, and I started living with her, because what happens after we got married, I moved into her house, and so long story short, there was this one specific time where I was on the recliner, and I was like tucking the footrest on the recliner, and
Yeah.
then my wife came up to me, she's like, "Oh, be careful, because you don't want to crush our little cat." And I'm thinking to myself, what? Like what are the odds of that? And it sounds so silly, like when I talk about it, but I think all of you men out there can relate that all these arguments, when you look from the outside, they're stupid, but in the moment
Right.
you feel very insulted. And so, and in that moment, I felt very insulted because, it kind of brought me back to my childhood wounds where, my grandfather was super critical. And so to me, like, as silly as was, the way it came across to me was like, hey, she's criticizing me just like my grandfather is, because obviously, there's no way I can crush the little cat with the footrest. It's just so out there. And so I got angry with her. And obviously I didn't scream at her, but it's just, I kind of did a very typical men thing to do, which is I went to the cave. I gave her the
Yeah.
silent treatment. And I'm pretty good about not like lashing out in a moment, but but I went essentially, I went to my cave. And it took me a few hours to realize it, but it's like, hey, this is not how I want my marriage to be. And so, I forget exact amount of time, probably like a few hours later, I was like, hey, can we talk about it? And I explained to her, it's like, hey, baby, when you said that, it really hurt me because I just felt like you were criticizing me for no reason. And, it kind of brought me back to my childhood, and apologies, but I just want to make sure that you see where I'm coming from. And then what she said is like, hey, I totally get it. The reason why I'm really so close to my animals is because my parents didn't give me enough attention. I grew up with dogs, and so the most experience, the most love I've experienced was from my animals. And so like right now, that's why I'm so close to my animals, and I feel so protective of them, because I feel like it's the animals that gave me the love that I didn't have as a child. And so that was very helpful to me to realize, is that this is not just about putting outfits on dogs and taking pictures. This is something that really helped her growing up, and that's why she's also attached to these animals. And so that was a perfect opportunity where we kind of saw each other's perspectives, and through that conflict we got to know each other deeper, and that actually strengthened our relationship.
Oh, that is so great. Exposing, in your case, vulnerability, being curious, asking some questions, sharing something, you know, that, and we all have that. We all have something as kids that triggers us.
Mm-hmm.
And it's taken me years to work through it. And I used to be the best at the silent treatment.
Oh yeah, yeah, and it's actually very common. Like I read that book, "Men Are from Mars, Women Are from Venus," or vice
Yeah.
versa. And as it turns out, that's actually a very common men's trend. I mean, obviously some men lash out, but most of the men, they go to the cave, and they shut down. And it's obviously, I think it's better than yelling at people,
Yeah.
but it's still not the a productive way of handling conflict. There's better ways to do it.
Yeah. And how simple would that be if we just open up to our wives, ask a couple questions,
Yeah,
apologize for getting
yeah, yeah,
angry. And then
yeah.
in your case, your wife says, hey, I wasn't getting on your case. I was just coming from
Hmm.
afraid that our cat was going to get wounded
Hmm.
because I love them like a kid or like a family member or what have you.
Yeah,
And
yeah,
it
yeah,
relates back to my childhood also, where
yeah, yeah.
she had her own issue,
Mm.
something so simple. But yeah, I remember many times my wife and I, something would trigger us, and then I might be gone for maybe 3 days or so,
Mhm.
still in the
Yeah,
house.
yeah, and so one thing to remember, that even though I'm a coach and I get paid to do this, it doesn't mean that in a moment I can come up with these questions. It's okay to take some time to digest it, and then come in when you're ready. And in fact, especially when you're new to this, it's best thing not to act on it in a moment. Just kind of go to your cave, kind of collect your thoughts, and when the emotions come down, have that conversation. But I think part of the problem is, like, a lot of times we assume that once conflict happened, it's damage done, and we just need to keep quiet so we don't get more damage. But the fact of the matter is that you can go back to that moment, and in fact, please go back to the moment, because when you have a constructive conversation, what seems like a damage or a wound is actually something that can enhance the relationship. And so, for example, in my case, am I like a huge animal lover? No, but I don't roll my eyes anymore when my wife puts costumes on them. I'm supportive to them because I just realized how important it is for her.
Yeah, and had you known that before that
Mhm.
incident,
Mhm.
probably could have worked through that a lot better.
Yeah,
So
yeah, yeah. And then, I
working
mean,
together in good times to work
yeah,
through things to help prevent things.
yeah.
And when things do happen,
Mhm.
maybe, if you need, take a minute or take an hour, take a few hours. And
Mhm.
I've heard some people say, hey, would it, Brad, if we reconnected in maybe an hour or so
Yeah, yeah,
and,
yeah, yeah.
discuss this? Right now is not a good time for me.
Yeah, because I
And
knew that my wife is a animal lover, but understanding why really helped me to understand where she's coming from. Because up until that point was very superficial, and quite frankly, I was judgmental of it. But once I figured out the why, Oh, no worries. You go, girl.
Something I've discovered over time is people that have done some things in a very successful kind of way. So, Rangers,
Mhm,
SEALs,
mhm,
executive leadership coaches, people that
mhm,
have been in an
mhm.
executive position, they have had something that I discovered over time myself, something called imposter syndrome.
Mm,
My imagination tells me that you've probably run into that as well.
sure. It's actually I'm surprised like this comes up a lot in my coaching sessions, and it's not something that is particular to any group of people like women, men, or high level new employees. It's just all across the board. And I'm just stumped how many sessions I talk about the imposter syndrome. And to some people it's worded differently. Some people call it the inner critic. Some people call it gremlins. But the core idea behind that is these accusatory thoughts that I'm not good enough, I'm not smart enough. Typically the breakdown between men and women is that typically at the core of those, the inner critic for men has to do something about not being strong enough, and for women it tends to be about not being enough, not doing enough. That's kind of like typically the main distinction. But men,
Hmm.
women, they all get them. And so, like, just maybe it's just like a practical tip for your audience. Like, when this comes up, like, one of the most effective tools that I found dealing with the inner critic is giving it a name. Because what happens is that we have thoughts, and because the thoughts were always in us since we were born, since we became aware, we assume that our thoughts are our identity. And so we think that these negative thoughts are just fact of life. So it's very helpful to in addressing these negative thoughts is give them a name, give them an identity, so it helps you realize that they're not part of you. And so, like, what one helpful step is to give your inner critic a name. And the best thing to do is just give it a name that really resonates with you. So I'll give you an example. Like, one time I was coaching this lady from Amsterdam, and she's spoke English very well. But then I wonder, like, there, even though she speaks English, it's like a different country, different terms.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
like, when I was asking her to name her inner critic, I was like, there was a lot of quiet time. I was like, man, does she understand what I'm talking about? Does she like think I'm crazy? And she's like, I got the name. I was like, oh really? Like, what is it? But I don't know if I should name it. Like, I don't know if I should use that name. I was like, well, no, just tell me what it is. And you know what name she gave to her inner critic? Annoying bitch. And so what I'm trying to get at with these names, you want to have something that gives you a laugh and makes you realize how stupid, no, not really that you are, how stupid it sounds. And
My
so,
my name is Little Buddy.
yeah. So, or like there was a gem, like, he called it bad Bob, or nasty Nancy, just something that
Yeah.
really, that makes you realize that that voice inside of you, that was like a voice of authority. It's really this little gremlin that has no significance, and like, why am I listening to it? And
That's
so, like,
exactly why I use Little Buddy.
yeah,
There you
exactly.
are again. You're
Yeah,
like so
yeah.
humorous and so funny, and you've got all these little cutesy things you want to do, and you want
Mhm.
to mess me up. I don't
Yeah,
have time
so
for you, little buddy. Go ahead and get out of here.
yeah,
And I
exactly. And
dismiss
so,
the thought.
yeah, exactly. So that's why it's a good thing just to give it, a name that makes you laugh, makes it little, because that's what it is. It's a voice that we gotten so used to that it became a voice of authority. But it's just like, emperor has no clothes. It's really nobody that we've over time given authority to. And so, whenever that those negative thoughts come, you can say, hey, I appreciate your opinion, little buddy. But and then have some kind of an affirmation. But I am smart, I got this. And then and step into to working whatever you're working on. Because the way our brains are designed, there's been a study that negative thoughts have 4 times as much charge as positive thoughts. Obviously, from the evolutionary standpoint, and even nowadays, when you're on a highway, if somebody cuts you off, you don't want to be thinking about your strategic moves. You want to focus on the immediate danger, right? So
Yeah.
it's a very helpful thing. But the problem with that is that our brains tend to focus on what's comfortable. And so, instead of like actually taking action, we dwell on these thoughts, and they have a life of their own that really slows you down. So that's why it's helpful to identify those thoughts, call them out for they are, and replace them with affirmation and get after it. Because over time, that's how you create new brain circuits. So that way, next time it happens, you'll take action. You switch the thought patterns, and you waste less time worrying about things. You'll take more action, which in turn, it's like a muscle, will grow on its own, and it will help you to perform. And the more you perform, the more results you have. The more results you have, the more proof you have to your little buddy just
Yeah.
how full of crap he really is.
Yes, yeah, absolutely. So that's up to you guys, folks. Whichever way you want to go. If you want to go to the negative way or the positive way, you're going to
Mm-hmm.
build these super highways and
Mm-hmm.
you're going to be able to go really fast either direction. So
And
if you don't,
and then and then the benefit that we have. So like a lot of the executive coaching I do is in secular world, but what I believe it's actually even more helpful for those positive affirmations to use a scripture verse. For example,
yes,
like
yeah.
with me, like when I have my inner critic, my favorite ones goes is Philippians 4:13. I can do all things through Christ who
Christ who
strengthens me.
strengthens me.
Yeah, and
Yes.
so having those biblical affirmations is something that I believe is an advantage to us as Christians.
Yes, yes, so good. I love 4:13. I love
Mhm.
4:8. I love 4:9. I've got a friend of mine who's got all of Philippians memorized.
Mhm.
He's like, "Oh, it's no big deal. It's only 2.5 pages or 5 pages, 6 pages, depending." I'm like, so it's so cool. But 4:8 is study, and
Mhm.
4:9 is practice. So
Amen.
study, practice, and teach helps us learn things. And
Mhm.
yeah, those affirmations are so good. I am worthy. I am enough. I am smart. I
Mhm.
am strong. I'm
Mhm.
powerful. I can do all things through Christ who
Yeah.
strengthens me. So
Yeah.
yeah, so good.
And one thing to keep in mind is that we always use affirmations, and if we don't use positive affirmation, that means we are using negative affirmations. so so
Yes,
so
yes,
so
absolutely.
so that's why, and then a lot of times we just don't realize it. So hopefully the men who are listening, you can kind of think about what kind of thoughts do I have, and if you have those negative thoughts, use that little tip to help you step out of them, because there's nothing good that comes out of those negative affirmations.
And
you know
a question you can ask, a filter you can use is, would I say that thought to my friend? Would I
yeah,
tell them
yeah,
that?
yeah.
Why
And
am
then
I
like
telling it to myself? And why am I believing it myself?
Yeah, and then like another thing that's very powerful. I think it was Brene Brown who said it, that if you're looking for a proof that you don't belong, you always find it.
Yes.
So by default, you always find proof that you don't belong, you're not worthy, and so that's why it's so important to use
Yes.
affirmations to
Seek
program
whatever
yourself, yeah, to for the
whatever you're
positive.
looking for.
Yeah,
Seek and you will find it.
exactly.
And then with affirmations and rejecting, take captive the thought. It's in the Bible. There's so much wisdom in the Bible. So read the
Amen.
Bible, read the Bible, read it with a group of people, do a devotional, be
Mhm.
involved in groups. Helps so much. So we always love to end the podcast with a
Sure.
challenge.
Hmm.
Can you think of a challenge for the men this week, for the dads this week to step into and engage? Maybe something that they could do for a week or a day or
Sure,
something to.
sure. So I actually I believe that the best way to practice is to involve somebody else. To be the change you wish you had. I think it was Gandhi who said it. Like, there's a lot of self-help books, and I think it was Simon Sinek who had a good observation, is that actually the best way to help yourself is help somebody else. And so like one of the things we talked about is the theme of perseverance. I talked about it beginning, when it came to swimming. Also, we talked about the inner critic, how the inner critic how it has us doubts, makes us doubt, which makes us less likely to follow through on something. And so how about this as a challenge? Make it a point for the next week every day to compliment somebody, whether that's your kid, your wife, your coworker, because that does two things. When you compliment somebody, it's very likely that you can start that pay it forward effect, But it's also like when you compliment somebody, it makes you find things that you appreciate in that person. And when you find that and you see how people respond, it will be much more likely that you will keep up that practice, and it will be much more likely that you will do these exercises, because you see how seemingly silly things like complimenting somebody have a big impact. For example, I was in corporate America where people got paid a lot of money, and guess what? They were miserable. And instead of getting a huge, I'm not saying that money is not important. It definitely is. But a lot of the times, the simplest things that are free, like compliments, would have went a long farther than the pay raise that the person has gotten. And so it's very underrated, and it's one of those things that it takes practice, because by default we focus on the negative. And so when we have somebody modeling it for us, when we are the example, it's much more likely they're going to follow through. And so please make it a habit every day, compliment somebody, see how powerful it is, and keep continuing it, because we need more people doing it, because that's how we build communities, and that's how we encourage each other, and that's how we grow as a body of Christ.
Oh, that is a fantastic challenge. I love it. I'm glad I let you pick it instead of me.
Oh, well, you're like, oh, I got one. I was like, no, no.
That one is so simple and something I wouldn't have come up with. It's something I do every day and it's paid dividends over and over and over again. So I want to start right now with implementing that right now. So thank you, Marek, for being so open, so honest, so vulnerable, and giving of your time. We haven't even talked about your fantastic book yet, The Love Driven Man, How to Open Your Heart to What Matters Eternally. So everybody check out his book, dive in. I just genuinely appreciate how loving you are and how that just flows through you and to the people I've seen you interact with, and appreciate you just literally opening the book and saying, whatever you want to talk about, I'm game. Like, let's go for it. Love the passion you have for your love of God, love of Christ, and just you're real, man. You're
Oh,
real.
well,
I love it. And we need more real men like you that share the gospel and share their love of Christ with others. So thank you, Marek.
my pleasure, Dan. Thank you so much for having me. Thank you for this opportunity. And yeah, it's just fantastic to connect and talk. And so if you guys ever have anything on your heart, or you heard something that really struck with you, please go to my website, marekrudak.com. There's an opportunity to schedule an appointment. And so if there's something that you're struggling with, or want to discuss, I'm more than happy to talk to you. It's just 15 minutes complimentary appointment. And I'll do my best to give you some free advice and tips to help you make those little changes that over time amount to a lot of big things.
Fantastic, fantastic. And we'll put that in the
Mhm.
show notes also. So website and link to the book and everything else. So thank you very much. And I look forward to talking to you again here soon. Soon. I really, really enjoyed this conversation.
My pleasure, guys. God bless you guys, and talk to you soon.
God bless you, Marek.